Snow White has collapsed. Snow White, this is crazy. So let me take you back in time. New Snow White movie has come out, a remake starring, I think her name is Rachel Zegler, as Snow White, and it also has Gal Gadot, and I don't know who the other people are in it, okay? It is a remake of one of the most successful movies of all time, which was the original Snow White, made in 1937. And let me give you a little bit of a history lesson. Basically, Walt Disney mortgaged his entire company and his own family's home, I believe, to complete the Snow White movie in 1937. And it was such a fabulous success that it made, in inflation-adjusted dollars, $4 billion. That is billion with a B. The 1937 Snow White, released, 88 years ago, made $4 billion. I bet every single person watching or listening to this at some point in time has seen Snow White either as a kid, either as a parent, either as a grandparent, maybe as all three, okay? Disney decided they were going to remake Snow White. They have a movie that everybody loves. They have a history of remaking movies that have been successful. But they decided they were going to remake it, and they were going to make it as woke as they possibly could. The thing has been in the works since, I believe, 2021. They've had to reshoot it. They have spent a ton of money. It opened week one to $43 million in the United States. Disney is on track on this movie alone to lose hundreds of millions of dollars. The likely cost of this movie is at least $500 million. It cost somewhere around $250 million to make. Almost every movie doubles that for marketing. Only about half of the overall revenue that is announced from a movie goes to the bottom line. So this movie is going to lose Disney hundreds of millions of dollars. And all they had to do was make Snow White just like the one from 1937. Go hire Sydney Sweeney, put her in the Snow White outfit, and that thing would have made $1 billion. All right? I'm not even being hyperbolistic here, right? Just remake the movie, make it the way that everybody loved it. If even, I would have actual real-life dwarves, right? Because you're not going to make everybody happy doing anything. The dwarf community was both angry that there were no dwarfs and angry that there might be dwarfs in the movie. I'm just going to tell you. If I was a dwarf actor and they didn't pick dwarves to star in the movie that has made dwarves more famous than any movie ever, I would feel actually personally attacked. Because everybody can't be Tyrion Lannister. There are only so many great dwarf movies, and Peter Dinklage gets every dwarf role. So Peter Dinklage is like, I think it's insulting that they would have dwarves in real life. Why? Because you're filthy rich and you got every good dwarf role in the history of mankind? You should get on your knees every day and thank George R.R. Martin for actually creating a dwarf character. Because otherwise you would have never made any money because there aren't a lot of great dwarf characters out there. You would have been begging to be one of the 7 dwarves. Like most dwarf actors are. You can only get thrown on the Wolf of Wall Street so many times. That doesn't pay that well. The residuals aren't great. Somebody tell me what the last great dwarf role that was played by somebody other than Peter Dinklage is. Can anybody give me one? Just one. I can't think of one. This would have been 7 of them. Maybe you get famous. Maybe you're great in this movie, and suddenly they start writing all these great dwarf pieces. I would have put dwarfs in it. But most importantly, I would have put Sydney Sweeney in. I would have found the most popular, hot, young actress, and I would have made her Snow White. And then I wouldn't have made, and this seems like a flaw to me, I wouldn't have made the evil queen better looking than Snow White. Okay? I don't know who the evil queen should be. Maybe Nicole Kidman. Just tossing it out there. Nicole Kidman, evil queen. Sydney Sweeney, Snow White. Seven Dwarfs, boom, I just made you $1 billion. Okay? This shouldn't be that hard to do. Make the movie that is nostalgic and fun that everybody loves. Have all of the same friggin' songs. And boom, you get rich. Instead, Disney wokeified it. They got Gal Gadot, who's actually way better looking than Rachel Zegler, playing the evil queen. Gal Gadot, to her credit, is actually hugely outspoken in favor of Israel's right to defend itself. Rachel Zegler, because she's Jewish, Rachel Zegler, because she's a moron, is actually defending Hamas regularly in her posts. And she said she hates Trump and she has all these ridiculous things out there. Just hire somebody who loves America and has great boobs and make her Snow White and give her Seven Dwarves and give her an uglier stepmother and you make $1 billion. Disney couldn't do it. Okay? I just told you how Disney could have made $1 billion in this movie. Instead, they're going to lose hundreds of millions of dollars. And you want another book idea? I'm going to maybe have a chapter about this in my new book. How about the difference between 1937, Snow White creates basically the Disney Corporation by making $4 billion on this movie, to 2025, Disney lights its entire brand on fire and is going to lose hundreds of millions of dollars remaking the movie that made the company actually exist. It's crazy. Finally, and I got a lot of things going on right now. That's not a stray bullet. Adam says that's Nicole Kidman catching stray bullets. She's not as good looking as Sydney Sweeney. It could have been anybody. The evil stepmother needs to be older, used to be good looking, but not as good looking as Snow White. That's like the foundation of the movie. She stares in the mirror, and she's no longer the fairest of them all. Do I have to explain the show? And suddenly, after a long time of being the fairest in the kingdom, as someone who has never been the fairest in the kingdom, I don't know what that would feel like. Her title as fairest of the kingdom is usurped by this beautiful young Snow White. Put Sydney Sweeney in the Snow White dress. I'm telling you, you would have made $1 billion. It's not rocket science. This is just basic. How do you get people in to watch a movie? And by the way, every girl that's 24 in America would have dressed up as Snow White like Sydney Sweeney for Halloween this year. We would have never had hotter Snow Whites anywhere in the world. Everybody wins. The kids, the adults, the old men like me, everybody's a big winner. Sydney Sweeney in the Snow White outfit. I'm sorry for not being in charge of Disney and making $1 billion. No offense to Nicole Kidman. She's my neighbor. She's lovely. I'm told she's amazing in this new baby doll movie where she sleeps with a 20-year-old and is very heroic. Congratulations, Nicole Kidman. But you should have been the evil stepmother. Who's another person like Nicole Kidman? I would say Angelina Jolie, still very good looking, but she's in Maleficent, right? So I don't think she could be the evil queen in multiple Disney movies, but that's why Nicole Kidman would make some sense. Maybe other people have other ideas. And look, all I'm saying is I am not a genius. Maybe a little bit of a genius, but not like the smartest person on the planet. If I were making every decision about Snow White, just me, the movie would have made $1 billion. Disney would be swimming in cash right now. All they would have had to do is have someone who is moderately intelligent like me and actually understands the marketplace, and I could have cast this movie in 5 minutes, and I could have made Disney $1 billion. Instead, they go get a woke Snow White who hates America, hated the original movie. They cast an evil queen that's actually better looking. I'm sorry. The fairest of them all in this kingdom is Gal Gadot. She is better looking than Rachel Zegler. That's no offense to Rachel Zegler. She's lovely. Gal Gadot was freaking Wonder Woman. She's way hotter than you. The Mirror is never going to say that Rachel Zegler is better looking. On its face, I would look at this and say, failure. No, I'm not buying it. The fairest of them all is still the evil queen. which defeats the entire purpose unless you're going for a whole new Snow White. Then Snow White has the evil queen, who is hotter than Snow White, has no need to kill Snow White to remain the hottest in the kingdom. This is like Alabama sorority house life, all right? The whole movie doesn't make sense if the evil queen is still better looking than Snow White. Again, story 101. Study it. Nobody talks about this, by the way. Speaking of studying, I've studied Walt Disney a lot. You know what the guy's big genius was? He took incredibly popular fairy tales that everybody knew, but that were so old that they were no longer copyrightable, and he made his entire brand redefine the original storybook tales. People don't talk about this enough. The guy was a genius. He took all of the old fairy tales that tons of kids had been raised on. He didn't have to create brand new IP, intellectual product. They all had trademark copyrightable value, but the stories were so old that the characters were no longer copyrightable, and he swept in and he made them his. So now when people think about Snow White, even though for hundreds of years the story existed, they think that Disney invented it. Go back and look at all of the stories that he made so much money on. He was just able to jump in on stories that were already widely known. This is very different than the business model, for instance, for Pixar, right? The Pixar films, many of which are fabulous, all of them, by and large, create an entire new ecosystem of stories that otherwise didn't exist. Toy Story, The Incredibles, Nemo. Trust me, I've seen all of the Pixar movies, love them. I'm very impressed at the quality of those movies. It's actually a way more difficult thing to do because they had to invent an entire story and create a world around them. Whereas for many of the original Disney hits, Jungle Book, Peter Pan, Aladdin, many of them were already well-known stories and they just added animation to them. Cinderella, Snow White. Anyway, there's a little bit of a lesson for you on history as well that you probably weren't expecting here. I got fired up about this yesterday. My take on Snow White has gone mega viral. It's echoing across a lot of different social media sites. And I was still fired up about it last night. And I was talking about it with my wife. We went to a songwriting, open mic songwriting where they come out and they explain how they decided to come to write these hit songs. Actually pretty cool. They do a lot of these in Nashville. We were there. I think it's called Tin Pan South last night. We're driving home. And I'm having a conversation with my wife, and I say, Sydney Sweeney should have gotten the role of Snow White. Now, Buck, I'll get to Sydney Sweeney, back to her in a sec. Buck, and I co-sign on this, it's going to end up a headline somewhere probably. Buck said Rachel Zegler is simply not attractive enough to be Snow White. She's fine, but I kind of agree. I don't think she's attractive enough. And look, I get it. I'm fat, old, and ugly. So that doesn't mean that I'm saying that I should be Prince Charming. I shouldn't. But the flaw here, as I pointed out yesterday, is Gal Gadot is objectively far more beautiful than Rachel Zegler. So if the entire premise of the movie is the evil queen stares into the mirror and asks who the fairest of them all is, and Snow White is the answer, and that is what begins the conflict between the evil queen and Snow White, Gal Gadot is way better looking than Rachel Zegler. So there is no conflict, and Snow White doesn't work on a basic casting call here. Now, Sydney Sweeney should have been cast. Bob Iger is the CEO of Disney. Disney stock right now is $20 lower today, basically, than it was 10 years ago. So if you had gone out, I was looking at my handy app the other day, meaning today. Disney stock is right around $100 a share right now. And if you had bought Disney stock, I'm going to get this right, make sure I get it exactly right. If you had bought Disney stock on July 19th, 2015, that is nearly a full decade ago, Disney stock was just shy of $120 a share. In fact, it was $118.91 on July 19th, 2015. That is nearly a decade ago. Right now, Disney stock is $100. So Bob Iger has run this company for a decade. He has made hundreds of millions of dollars. And if you had simply bought Disney stock and held it for a decade, it has not panned out. You have not made any money. In fact, you've lost 20% of the overall stock price value. But you also, given inflation over the last decade, have lost a lot more than 20%. And in the 10 years, the stock market as a whole, the S&P 500, has more than doubled. So not only have you lost in real dollars, right? When you factor in inflation and you factor in dividends and everything else, you have done awful by buying Disney stock. Bob Iger could have come to me and I would have told him, hey, put Sydney Sweeney in Snow White and you will make $1 billion. You will be like Scrooge McDuck diving into the vault of all the cash that you will make if you make Sydney Sweeney Snow White. I'm convinced I'm right about this. My wife disagrees. My wife says that I have been befuddled, bedazzled, and have had the wool pulled over my proverbial eyes because I am allowing Sydney Sweeney's boobs to distract me from the fact that she is too old to play Snow White. I asked you guys, and by the way, for people who are like, nobody cares, 16,000 people have voted in this in the first hour already. I say if Disney had cast Sydney Sweeney as Snow White, the movie would have made $1 billion. My wife says I'm wrong, a moron, and distracted by Sweeney's boobs. Who's right? Lots of people weighing in the comments. OutKick's own Tommy Laren says, it's a children's movie, Clay, with emoji faces. To which I responded, parents go too. Ben Domenech says, opening night, I'm there. Dean Cain, former Superman, I think you both have good points. The comments are absolutely hysterical. I would encourage you all to go check them out. They are really, really funny. You will enjoy it if you go and read the comments. I stand by it. Sydney Sweeney would have made at least $1 billion for Bob Iger and Disney if they had simply cast her as Snow White. Bob Iger could have called me. He could have texted me. I could have hooked him up. Instead, they went with Rachel Zegler, who is not as good looking as Gal Gadot, who is actually awful and woke, hates Trump voters, many of whom are deciding not to take their kids to go watch this awful remake. And as a result, Snow White is going to lose hundreds of millions of dollars. It may end up being, when you factor in marketing cost and what it costs to make the movie, the least successful movie ever made because it cost well in excess of $500 million, and there is no way it is going to get out of there without losing hundreds of millions of dollars. Everything woke, Donald Trump was right about this, goes to shit. And Snow White, which in 1937 made $4 billion for Disney, basically created the entire Walt Disney Company. Well, guess what? Now everything has fallen completely apart. They should have gone with Sydney Sweeney, even if her boobs are a distraction. You know what? It would have been fine. America would have been better off. The Snow White movie would have been a success. Boobs and the First Amendment never let me down. The new Snow White movie, I know you're an aunt with a niece. I don't know if she is Snow White age in terms of being interested in going, is on track to become one of the biggest disasters in the history of movies. That is, they are going to lose, Disney, I think, hundreds of millions of dollars, okay? Rachel Zegler is the Snow White character. Most people hate her. But I want to start with important questions for you as a female to answer. You have no idea. You have not paid attention to this controversy. You have not been briefed about any of this at all, so you are reacting in real time. Question 1. Isn't it a flaw of the movie? Gal Gadot, who is Wonder Woman, gorgeous Israeli woman, is the wicked witch, the evil witch. She is staring into the mirror as the plot point of Snow White is that no longer is the evil queen the fairest of them all. It is instead Snow White. Objectively, is Gal Gadot not way better looking than Rachel Zegler, such that the movie can't work at all because the evil queen character, everyone knows, is better looking than Snow White? Like, there is no argument here. Am I wrong, or is that not integral to plot?
Here's the I'm not sure Disney cares about the plot. That's the hardest part of it all. Like, I'm trying to remember the story of Snow White. I'm pretty sure I had the book when I was a little kid. And then I remember watching it on VHS. And, you've got this creepy old lady with the apple who's just like very, very ugly, objectively. She's supposed to be. She's the wicked witch, right? Just like in Wizard of Oz and anywhere else, the evil stepmother in Cinderella. Like, they're supposed to be ugly, if you will, because that's how they're portrayed in the books. I think it's just weird altogether. When you try to incorporate too much, you lose your audience. Like, obviously Gal Gadot is better looking, but I just don't understand the point of why not having
so that's
like a true to character
that's point 1.
Snow White.
You agree with me. All right, point 2. If they had made Sydney Sweeney Snow White, I believe the movie would have made $1 billion. I think there are lots of dads all over America that would have suddenly got very interested in taking their kids to go see Snow White. I think that it would have made $1 billion. Laura, my lovely wife, who you know, says that I am, probably not for the first time, being seduced by boobs and not thinking logically, and that Sydney Sweeney is too old to play Snow White, and that her boobs are actually too big such that they would distract from the overall movie. I disagree. I think they would just be an added benefit. Am I right or wrong? Sydney Sweeney replacing Rachel Zegler, this is $1 billion movie.
So I have a handful of nieces, a handful of nephews. I've got half siblings with lots of kids, and siblings through relationships and neighbor kids that I'm the godmother of and so forth, right? But I would say objectively, there's like 90% girls to boy ratio that's in my life. And you're absolutely right. Every single one of my guy friends who has a child under the age of 15 would absolutely volunteer on a Sunday afternoon with no football to go see Sydney Sweeney in kind of a maiden-looking dress like Snow White wears, whether or not she's covered up or not. Yes, I think it's a child's movie. She should be covered up, just like I try to be a little modest here and there as a fully busty woman myself. But yeah, it's like a no-brainer. I mean, I'm not going to go see the movie regardless. I guess if my 10-year-old niece was like, Aunt Kelly, this is the movie I've been wanting to see for 2-3 years. Please take me. My parents won't. I would. But outside of that, I'm never going to go see the movie. But I can promise you, my childless boyfriend, if Sydney Sweeney was in the movie, he might say, hey, should we go see this movie? And I'd be like, no, enjoy. Go watch with somebody else. I don't know. I'm with you, Clay. Listen, I think Laura is highly intelligent and she knows you very, very well. But I think she's wrong on this one. I think Sydney Sweeney would have been an absolute box office hit. Of course, she's hot. She's got big boobs.
And she looks a little bit like Snow White, right? She's got the
don't
let
her
super
get a spray
white
tan.
skin, right? Like,
yeah, maybe she has to dye her hair brown or wear a wig. Or there's lots of hot, pale Snow White-esque women, right, that fit the description of the character in the book that they could have picked, but they didn't want to. And that's the whole point. They want to portray something that's not. And it's like, what are we doing here? It doesn't really matter if they had a hot chick of any background play Snow White. I think the movie would have done better than if it was Rachel Zegler.
I will also say this. You know who else lost? The men of America when it comes to Halloween. Because if Sydney Sweeney had been Snow White, every hot chick in America dressing up for Halloween would have brought back the Snow White outfit, right? Like, I haven't seen anybody dress up as Snow White in years for Halloween. It would have been, I bet, the best and most popular costume for good-looking girls all over America. So Disney screwed us out of all of these great things, and in the process lost themselves hundreds of millions of dollars.